While the Raiders continue to look for their next head coach, their GM search got a little bit scary on Thursday, but proves to be just a false alarm. That plus more on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for January 24th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you, whether you catch us wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking us out on the YouTube page. You know we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your support, Raider Nation, and because of the great job my man Ari does behind the scenes each and every day, making sure that the YouTube page looks good and sounds good. We appreciate him. We shout him out. He's on Twitter. You can hit him up, as many of you do, at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well, at your boy Q254. And you know, if you want to be a part of the show, 707-654-4693. Plenty of calls, plenty of texts to get to. We'll close out the show, close out the week with those calls and texts. And trust and believe there's plenty to get to when it comes to the head coach, the GM, a little bit of a scare that Raider Nation had on Thursday, and more. We'll get to all that coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Segment number 2, we'll continue to talk about the potential head coach as well. There's another one off the list. So now the potential head coaches are starting to get shorter and shorter and shorter as far as the availability, and that list goes. And, well, the Raiders still, as of right now, do not have their head coach. So you'll do a little bit of deep dive. We'll do a deep dive with you on Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator, a guy that the Raiders did interview. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day. And really, it's kind of the roller coaster affair that the Raiders had and Raider Nation had on Thursday when it comes to John Spytek, their GM. We'll get into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. As you know, it is never easy when it comes to the Raiders. Nothing is ever just smooth. Nothing just rolls through. Hey, this is the guy that's going to be named the GM. Okay, cool. Signed, sealed, and delivered. It's all good. As I've said so many times, until it's actually official, it's not really official, right? Until it's signed, sealed, and delivered, it's not official. And what I mean by that and why we bring that up is on Thursday, there was a conversation about, well, actually, we could take it back a day further. Actually, on Wednesday, Liam Cohen from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the offensive coordinator, pulled his name out of the mix for the Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching job and decided he was going to go back to Tampa Bay as the OC with the Rays. Then, all of a sudden, it was announced that John Spytek, and this is announced by Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport, not by the Raiders, announced that John Spytek was going to be the GM of the Raiders. So I said on a tweet, I wonder if this changes Liam Cohen's mind on going back to Tampa Bay as the OC. Many people in Raider Nation hit me and was like, there's no way he's going back to Tampa Bay as the OC. They already said he's got a raise, he's got a contract. And I continue to say, look, a head coaching job and an OC, they pay a lot different. And the head coach makes a whole lot more money. And, oh, by the way, John Spytek, the guy who is going to be the Raiders' next GM, is the guy that Liam Cohen wanted in Jacksonville to be the GM. And so he didn't want Trent Baalke, so he decided, no, I'm going to take my party and go back to Tampa Bay, be the OC, get a raise, and I can go back and do this thing next year. Well, right after that, Jacksonville got rid of Trent Baalke. So now, all of a sudden, everything is clear. And guess what? Liam Cohen changed his mind. So check out this little I guess we should call roller coaster timeline. This comes from my guy, Ari Mayrov from the 33rdteam.com. He tweeted out, to recap this unprecedented situation, Liam Cohen was the Jaguars' top target for their head coaching position. He was set to interview on Wednesday, but then withdrew his name. The Bucs then offered him an extension to become one of the highest paid coordinators in the league. The Jaguars bugged out and fired GM Trent Baalke. They reached back out to Cohen, asked if he'd reconsider. Cohen hadn't signed his Bucs contract yet and started engaging with the Jaguars again. Now Cohen at the Jaguars facility trying to finalize the deal. Meanwhile, the Bucs can't get in touch with him. Absolutely bananas. That's from Ari Mayrov. Well, later on Thursday, it became signed, sealed, and delivered. Liam Cohen reached out to the Buccaneers and said, yeah, that OC job, you're going to have to find someone to fill it. I'm taking this job in Jacksonville. So all of a sudden, when it was announced that Liam Cohen was back in Jacksonville talking with the Jaguars, Raider Nation started hitting a panic. We're like, wait, hold on. John Spytek hasn't signed his deal with the Raiders yet. There's been no announcement that he signed his deal as the GM. Could he back out? And, well, I mean, it's the same week that Ben Johnson decided to take the job in Chicago when a lot of Raider Nation thought he was going to be the head coach of the Raiders. So it's already, it's already kind of like you can't get me twice in the same week, right? I mean, Raider Nation's already on edge, already feels like they can't have nice things. John Spytek, a guy that a lot of us are getting excited about what he brings to the table, and you'll actually hear a little bit more about him in a little bit, all of a sudden wasn't too sure if he's actually going to be the GM. And so right in the middle of my radio show on Thursday, the news is when it broke out, and I was like, oh, wow, hold on. And again, I say it all the time, and I mean it. Nothing is done, nothing is official until it's done and official. So throughout the course of the night on Thursday night, there was questions, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And luckily, later on in the evening, a little bit after 9, all of a sudden, Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network tweeted out that there's no change of heart, there's no change of mind in Las Vegas. John Spytek has now signed his 5-year deal. Whew. Signed, sealed, and delivered. So that's done, right? So John Spytek is, in fact, the GM of the Silver and Black. But, man, you want to talk about a roller coaster. And look, I'm old. I'm not ready for roller coasters, right? Roller coasters make me sick. When I was a kid, that's different. I ain't no kid no more, so I don't need the roller coasters, and I know Raider Nation doesn't either. But all good. No worry to panic. No need to panic. John Spytek, signed, sealed, and delivered. He's going to be the GM. Now it's on to the head coach. But before we start talking about potential head coaches coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, I want you to hear what Carmen Vitali from Fox Sports had to say about John Spytek. She was around the organization, the Buccaneers, for a real long time, got to know him, got to know his family. She covers the NFL now nationally. She does a great job. She's based in Chicago, so she knows all things about Ben Johnson. But as she joined my radio show on Thursday, I asked her about John Spytek and what he brings to the table as the GM of the Silver and Black.
So I adore Spy. Him and his whole family, his wife Kristen, I got to know them very well in Tampa, and this is a job that Spy has been ready for years at this point. And now I know that everybody points to the connection with Tom Brady now in part of the ownership group in Las Vegas, and how they went to Michigan together, and this is something that they've had a long-standing relationship, so of course it makes sense. But this isn't the first hiring cycle that John Spytek has been a part of. He interviewed for the Denver GM job last year. He's been a name that has kind of been on those up-and-coming lists for years at this point, and he's ready. He's been a right-hand man to Jason Light, who I don't think gets enough credit down in Tampa for what he's been able to do with that roster and sustaining the roster, especially once Tom Brady left, and even before that. I mean, when you consider that his first pick ever, draft pick ever, was Mike Evans, clearly he has an eye for talent. So that's someone that John Spytek has come up underneath, and he's steadily risen in that organization to the point where these past couple of years he's been the assistant GM, and now he's ready for the big boy chair, and I couldn't be happier for Spy.
Carmen, what is it about Tampa Bay and the way that they draft, because they have so many guys that are able to get on the field early and be big-time contributors that they draft, not guys that are coming in as free agents, but they're homegrown guys. What is it that they are able to identify so early on?
Yeah, it really is. It comes down to talent evaluation, and it's the realization that there are diamonds in the rough to be found. You just have to know what to look for. And I think that someone that does that better than anybody is John Spytek. I mean, you look at some of the draft picks that they've hit on, and they're not necessarily first-round picks. Like, sure, guys like Tristan Wirfs, all-pro, first guy to go all-pro at right tackle and left tackle. That gets the headlines. He was the first-round pick. Obviously, that there were high expectations of him. But you look at guys even going back to guys like Ali Marpet out of Hobart. You got Donovan Smith, who was a later-round pick out of Penn State, which is a bigger-time program. But then you have guys like Alex Kappa, who's now with the Bengals. He was a Bucs draft pick out of Humboldt State, which doesn't even have a football program anymore. I mean, you find, especially like in the trenches, that's a huge thing with Jason Light, and I think that's something that will carry over to Spytek too, is building through the trenches on the offensive and the defensive lines. And they are so good at evaluating those positions and finding guys in the later rounds from the smaller schools. They're really big character guys. I think that's the biggest thing too, is you hear these guys talk about, we only want guys that are like football guys. We want guys that love the game. Because I think the reality is you'd be surprised to learn that a lot of these guys don't love football. It just happens to be what they're good at. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that's ever flown with Jason Light. That's not something that flies with John Spytek either. They have to love football. And I think that when you look at those smaller school guys, they're the best example of that because they're not getting the red carpet treatment. They're not getting, everything done for them and all that other stuff. They're the ones that have academic standards placed on them. They're the ones that have to, do everything on their own and take the initiative and have that motivation. And it means that they're a little more complete as far as the character and the player goes. Not to say that the Bucs have not drafted out of big-time schools, because of course they have, but the character is just as important to kind of the on-field play and how hard they're going to play. And you see that in the physicality that the players that the Bucs have drafted have, and I really think that that's something that John Spytek prioritizes too.
There's Carmen Vitali right there from Fox Sports. She does a fantastic job covering the National Football League, and I thought she had some really good intel right there on John Spytek, what he brings to the table, what kind of players the Buccaneers, they covet in the draft, and they really build through the draft. I mean, they have so many snaps that rookies have each and every year. They have such a young team. The team that was led by Tom Brady that won a Super Bowl was a very old, veteran-laden team. After Brady left, after Gronk left, they were able to turn that thing around really quickly with a very young team, right, to the point where they had 11 guys on defense that were first-year starters. I mean, there was just so many young dudes out there, but playing at a high level. So they really like to build through the draft, and you heard from Carmen there the kind of players that they're looking for. He spent time in Denver, spent time in Philadelphia, and how they try to build their team, especially in Philadelphia, where they want to build through the trenches. But it's all good. John Spytek, again, is now officially the GM of the Silver and Black with a 5-year deal. Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network, he tweeted that out Thursday evening, so no need to panic on that. So now the next order of attack is who's going to be the head coach. Ben Johnson's off the books. Mike Vrabel's off the books. Aaron Glenn, Liam Cohen, Robert Saleh. So who's left? Well, we'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a great sponsor here on the show, and that is PrizePicks. It's playoff time. If you're like me, you want to make the most out of these final weeks of football action, and that's where PrizePicks comes in. You love football, want a chance to win some real money while watching the games? PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. How do you do it? It's simple. You pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards, rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. It doesn't matter if you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly. PrizePicks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions with the B in winning, it's clear that people love the platform. They've got so many different options for you. You're definitely going to enjoy that. And right now, here's a special offer for all Locked On Raider podcast listeners. Locked On NFL as well, but we'll focus in on the Raiders, right? Download the app today, use the promo code Locked On NFL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. And if you missed it, don't worry, I got your back. Download the app today, use the promo code Locked On NFL, it's all one word, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to continue with our deep dive into who could be in line to be the potential head coach of the Silver and Black. And Ben Johnson's off to the Bears. Mike Vrabel's with the Patriots. Aaron Glenn is with the Jets. Liam Cohen, as of Thursday, is with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Robert Saleh, who was in line to potentially be the Jaguars head coach, along with Patrick Graham, who had multiple interviews lined up with them. Obviously, that doesn't matter at this stage of the game. Robert Saleh is returning to San Francisco to be the defensive coordinator. So that doesn't leave a whole lot of guys. Cliff Kingsbury, there's no sign that he wants to be a head coach. Mike McCarthy, I think he's going to be in line to maybe get the Saints job, but who knows? Vance Joseph is interviewed with the Raiders. Ron Rivera has interviewed with the Raiders. Obviously, we talked about him, and we did a little bit of a deep dive on him on yesterday's show. Pete Carroll, he's actually the leader in the clubhouse. A lot of people are talking about him and thinking that he's going to be the guy to get the job, but now all of a sudden his name is associated with the Dallas Cowboys job as well. Him and Brian Schottenheimer, those are the two guys that you're hearing being rumored around the Dallas Cowboys. And then you've got Steve Spagnuolo, who is the Chiefs defensive coordinator. So before we get into hearing about Spags, I did want you to hear from Albert Breer from Monday Morning Quarterback. Sports Illustrated does a fantastic job. He was on the Rich Eisen show the other day. And the one thing I know about Albert Breer is he doesn't say anything that he doesn't know that it's not coming from a place of anywhere, right? He doesn't just say anything like he's pulling something out his backside and throwing it up against the wall and hope it sticks. Whenever he says something, it's coming from somewhere. And it's funny, on the Rich Eisen show, when he was on, this was before Spytek got announced to be the GM of the Raiders, he actually had said that he thought Spytek was going to get the job. And he said, now I'm not saying he's going to get it. And Raider Nation, I promise you, about 15 minutes later, Spytek was the guy that Schefter and Rappaport and others were talking about being the next GM of the Raiders. So, again, Albert Breer very dialed in. But here he is on the Rich Eisen show just talking about what's going on in Vegas as far as the coaches go.
Yeah, so, I think Tom Brady's personal relationships are a factor here. One thing that I did hear was, not to rule out Pete Carroll or Steve Spagnuolo because Brady has respect for them having gone up against them, having played against them. Obviously, he's competed on a Super Bowl stage against each of those guys. Spagnuolo with the Giants way back when, and then obviously, against Pete Carroll in Super Bowl 49, I think it was, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that.
Albert Breer, Monday Morning Quarterback, SI.com, does a hell of a job covering the NFL on the Rich Eisen show. And you hear he brings up the name Steve Spagnuolo, brings up the name Pete Carroll. And again, I believe Pete Carroll's a leader in the clubhouse, but the list is getting shorter and shorter and shorter unless there's some surprise name that we don't know about. I know Todd Monken is a guy that has been requested, but never, heard anything about that request. Did he accept it? Did he deny it? Did he not get it? Did it get lost in the mail? Did he fall asleep on it? What happened? Did he not know how to set up the Zoom? I don't know. Never heard anything about Todd Monken, so I wouldn't count on that, even though he does have ties with John Spytek. So maybe that's a guy and a direction that they can go sooner rather than later. But Dana Hughes, Chiefs color commentator, former wide receiver there in Kansas City, joined my radio show to talk about Spags and really just kind of started off asking him, what has he done this time around? Of course, he was a head coach in St. Louis, didn't work out very well. Really good defensive coordinator with the Giants, and obviously he's been a really good defensive coordinator with Kansas City. But why now? What has he done that people are reaching out and trying to interview him for potential head coaching jobs? Here's Danon.
You can't minimize the accomplishments that's happening. So when you ask about Spags and the opportunities that'll present itself, let's face it, bad teams have coaching changes. And it's unfortunate that great coaches, and we've seen that, or really good coaches, up-and-coming coaches, are relegated to bad teams to have to turn them around. But that's the name of the name of the game. That's the beast that we're in. And Spags, when you ask that question about what he's done, think about it from this perspective. And this is the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask that. We are a team that when you think of the Kansas City Chiefs, you think of one of the greatest head coaches in NFL history, one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, definitely one of the greats, if not the greatest right now, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, to ever play tight end. All three of those, what do they have in common? Offense.
Yeah.
And yet, Spags has been able to usurp that and force people to overlook our offense just a bit because of the nature of our defense especially over the last 2 years. And that tells you a lot about his makeup. It tells you a lot about how he can exist within an organization and what his imprint really does to a team. We're talking about most of last year, the biggest story in that Super Bowl run was the drops by the wide receivers on offense and how good the defense was. Most of the conversation this year with the offense sputtering just a bit or not necessarily playing up to their potential until December, which is fine with me, was about the defense.
Right. And
how the defense was shutting teams down week after week. And having that amazing record of not giving up 28 points or more for over a year. That tells you something about his imprint. So I'm not surprised that he's garnered a lot of interest. I think it's justifiable, and, we'll see how it all unfolds.
He's been able to put together a defense, and even when he's lost players, it seems like he's just retooled and been able to do – how has he kind of been able to do that, patch it up when guys leave and, say, free agency?
I think it's about the continuity and the teamwork that starts at the top. And when I say the top, you're talking about Brett Veach, obviously Clark Hunt, but Brett Veach and the scouting department, bringing in the right free agents and drafting. Think about this team and how good it's been. You have, last year's Super Bowl run had a 2-year pro in George Karlaftis, a 2-year pro in Trent McDuffie. You had a bunch of young guys, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, 2-year guys that were integral in the success of last season. And you move those guys, and we're talking about them in their 3rd year. I mean, they're still babies, like in the NFL, and yet they're big-time playmakers, and you surround them with some other parts, and everybody knows what they're supposed to do. They know their role. And when you lose L'Jarius Sneed, you had to realize that you had something or someone or multiple people that would be able to fill that gap. Otherwise, you wouldn't let him go. And for the emergence of those guys, we draft Jaden Hicks this year. He gets spotty play because Shamari Connor was really playing exceptional safety. Well, Jaden Hicks comes in. Next thing you know, he's leading the team in interceptions. It's just the way that they draft, and unlike a lot of other teams where they slowly bring on guys that they draft, you ever hear the comments from coaches that say, I don't play rookies, or rookies can't play in this defense. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not the case here. They throw these guys out there, prepare them extremely well, and throw them on the field and let them make mistakes, cover some of those mistakes. We still play winning football, and they learn. So when guys go down, somebody steps up, and you don't feel like they are going to be outmatched. And I think that's a product of Spags and what he does with his unit. And that hasn't always been the case. Mm-hmm. If you think back to years in the past, Spags was one of those coaches that probably shied away from playing rookies and young guys and leaned on older guys. And it's a transformation of the times now. And if you are an owner of an organization, wouldn't you want somebody that has been able to transform their mindset and their game plan, still have the same success and to the levels of Super Bowl wins? So I feel like it's probably overdue for Spags. I know Matt Nagy, from an offensive standpoint, he's garnering some attention. I still think one of the worst stories in the last half a decade in the NFL was Eric Bieniemy not having any true opportunities because of the success and the resume that he put together. But I think everybody's happy for Spags no matter what decision he makes.
So what do you think, Danon? Is this the year? Does he make the move following the season whenever it gets wrapped up, Super Bowl or whenever? Do you think he goes and takes a head coaching job somewhere?
I don't know. I think, like I played in the 90s, and Gunther Cunningham was a defense coordinator, and he had opportunities to be a head coach. He actually became the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs at the end of my career, and then went right back to being a defensive coordinator when he had 2 years as a head coach, and he basically had a 500 record, 8-8 each year. Some guys, they either recognize or they come to the understanding that, like, I can climb the ladder, but the best place for me is a coordinator. Not everybody's built for head coaching. I'm not saying that that's the case for Steve Spagnuolo. I'm saying that that's a decision that he'll have to make, because there's something to be said about being really, really good at something and always looking around the corner to see what's better. I think some guys like Gunther is a perfect example. He came to realize, you know what, my lane is as a defensive coordinator. I don't think that's the case. I think Spags, when I was out, Justin Reed had a celebrity softball tournament this summer. Spags was out there supporting his guys.
Nice.
And like that's stuff that you don't hear about with coordinators and coaches in the NFL. So, and they're wearing T-shirts supporting him as, assistant coach of the year, I think last year or something like that. So, like, there's a bond that I think other organizations will recognize, that it spans more than just football and X's and O's. I think he's worthy of a head coaching job. It's just a matter of if he wants it.
There he is, Danon Hughes right there, talking about what Steve Spagnuolo has done, what he brings to the table, and the fact that he believes that, he's ready to be a head coach again. Doesn't know if he's going to take the job. Obviously, Kansas City's still playing. They might very well end up being in New Orleans. And if they are still playing, then maybe there's a shot that, he can't get hired. Well, he can't get hired until after the season's over. So if he is the guy that the Raiders are looking at, and I'm not saying that he is, then that hire's not going to happen until, mid-February, right? Just about it. If they end up going to the Super Bowl, that's on February 9th, so they couldn't really make that hire till after the game is over. So I don't know if that's the guy. Again, I think it's Pete Carroll. I think he's going to end up getting the job, but until we actually know for sure, we don't know for sure. Now, it's funny, I mentioned on Thursday's show that I got Pete Carroll's contact, or I got a contact that said Pete Carroll, so I was going to reach out and try to get a hold of him. So I texted him on Thursday, and I didn't get any. No, was it Thursday? No. It was Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday night I texted him, and I thought, okay, I'm going to text him, and I'll see what happens. I got no response. So on Thursday, and it's funny, I thought about it like all night. I'm laying in bed, can't sleep because I keep thinking about how am I going to approach this. I haven't got a response, but you're guaranteed to miss a shot that you don't take, so I got to take the shot, right? I got to find a way to try to get Pete Carroll on. How cool would that be to be able to interview him, and then he ends up being the Raiders head coach? That's how it played out in my head. So I'm at the radio station on Thursday morning, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to call him. And it's like 7 a.m., but there was no studio that was available at the station at that time. So right when I was about to press call, I thought, wait, hold on. What if he answers, and what if he agrees to an interview, but I don't have a studio to record him in? Like, this is all going through my head. This is how sick I am and twisted I am, and always thinking about what I can do and how do I can get this interview. So I said, okay, I'm going to wait till 10. I'm going to wait till my guy Jared comes in, and then we're going to go into the ESPN studio. I'm going to call him. If he agrees to it, boom, going to knock out the interview right then and there. I got my questions all lined up. I got everything planned out. I got my headphones. Like, I'm good to go, right? I'm in show mode. And I'm going to pick up my phone and do it right now. I get into, no joke, I get into the studio with Jared, and I'm like, hey, are you ready? Let's get ready to go. And I call him, and this is what happens. Check it out.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording in error, please check the area code and the number and try your call again.
So as you can tell, the number don't work. The number's not a real contact. But I tried, right? I always say you're guaranteed to miss a shot that you don't take. I took the shot, I guess. Maybe I wasn't shooting on the right court. I don't know. But I tried to take the shot, and it didn't work. But it was a good try. So there's that. So, no Pete Carroll interview for me, but Raider Nation, I tried. But there you go. You heard a little earlier in the segment from Dan and Hughes talking all things Steve Spagnuolo, and he could be a guy that's in line to potentially get the head coaching job for the Silver and Black. Coming up in segment number 3, what's on your mind? Your calls and texts at 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple more great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, and the first one is Gametime. I love going to live events. Sports, music, theater, comedy, doesn't matter, right? Favorite type of events are live events. The energy, the excitement, they are unforgettable. Well, Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff, show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. None of that. All you got to do is focus in and make it happen on the Gametime app. Get the Gametime Picks, and you'll get all the super deals that you need on the app, all in the right spot. So it's very easy, and all the total cost is up front, so there'll be no surprise fees when you go to check out. Nike gets me like that all the time. I think I got a really good deal on my Nike app, and then all of a sudden it says estimated price. And then when I go and press checkout, it says total price. I was like, whoa, hold up there. Hold up, swallow them up. Totally different price. But they won't happen like that to you on Gametime, not the Gametime app. They don't work like that. Right now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime? Y'all know why I say it like that. My mama likes it. Also, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. In growing your small businesses in 2025, it comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. Anyone has used LinkedIn Jobs, and they can tell you it's a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. All small businesses are wearing a lot of hats. We know that, so every hire is crucial. LinkedIn gets that. That's why they connect you with the best candidates using data that you won't find anywhere else. From unique skills and interests to the connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. As a matter of fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high-quality candidates really quickly. Right now, hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with a call from John in Colorado. He's calling to talk about Pete Carroll, his thoughts on him as far as experience and stability. Here he is, John in Colorado.
Hey, Q. It's your boy, John. I'm over here in Aurora, Colorado. I'm a long-time fan of yours. I watch your show all the time, and I follow you. I'm with you, dude. Pete Carroll's got to be the way to go. Antonio Pierce, I wanted, but he did make a lot of mistakes, and I think he listened to a lot of other voices, whether that was other coaches or what have you, while he was in a live game where, I mean, there was a couple of questionable either plays or calls, and I hated to see Antonio go. I didn't want to see him go. I thought he was a Raider, true, full-blown, inside and out Raider. But yeah, we need to go with experience. We need, stability. First and foremost, from the top to the bottom, we need stability. And that's how you build a franchise. And I think Tom knows that, and I thank God that Mark Davis is finally, hey, I'm putting this guy in charge of everything. And I'm so excited, even though I hated Brady for years because of the Tuck rule. But I'm a diehard Raiders fan. I've been a Raiders fan for 46 years of my life. So pretty much since I was born. And living in Aurora, Colorado, in Donkey Land, it's tough, dude. It's tough when the only thing we have to look forward to every year is the draft. And unfortunately, that's been our script the last 20 years. I love your show, and I'm in agreement with you. I think that if Pete Carroll would be a great fit. Yeah, everybody's talking about his age, but listen, that guy is like 70-something years old and acts like he's freaking 40. He's in better shape than freaking half the 40-year-olds out there or 30-year-olds. And he's experienced. He's a freaking firecracker, and he's exactly what we need. And, hey, I just want us to win. That's all Raider Nation wants.
Big John, thanks for the call. Experience, stability, been there, done that. As far as Pete Carroll, that makes sense to me, right? And it's okay to kind of have reserved feelings about Pete Carroll. Look, I wasn't 10 toes down with Pete Carroll when that name was first presented to me by Vinny Bonsignore. I thought, okay, well, whatever, because I wanted to be wowed. But sometimes you don't have to be wowed. Sometimes wow's not the best move. And Pete Carroll, especially with who's left, I think Pete Carroll is probably the best guy for the job, knowing what he's already done, knowing his track record, and, being able to create an identity. Even if the Raiders don't necessarily have their quarterback of the future, he can start to build that identity and know exactly how to get it done, know the structure that he's looking for. So I do like the Pete Carroll idea. And like I said, he's a leader in the clubhouse right now. I think most people believe he's going to get the job. And I think at this stage of the game, he's definitely probably the best guy for the job. But Big John, thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from True from Albuquerque. He says, hey, Q, it's True from Albuquerque. First of all, thanks for sharing about your son. Prayers for you. Love the show. I haven't heard much about the Steve Spagnuolo interview, but if the Raiders don't make a hire this week, wouldn't it seem like they may be the hire since the Chiefs are still playing? I know he wasn't good as a head coach with the Rams, but he has been with Andy Reid. Just wondering your opinion. That's True from Albuquerque. Thanks for the text. And, yeah, there's a strong possibility, a real strong possibility that they could be waiting till after the Chiefs get wrapped up if they do, in fact, have him on their radar, right? And according to Albert Breer, he's on their radar. Tom Brady has a lot of respect for him because it was hard when he was playing against them. Like his defenses that he constructed, and obviously Raider Nation knows about his defenses that he has with Kansas City. So, yeah, I mean, as much as that's not a wow guy either, Steve Spagnuolo is never going to get me to be, oh, man, that's a great hire. I'm going to do a backflip. Man, the Raiders are going to go to the Super Bowl. I'm never going to be that guy with Spags, but he very well could be a guy that they're looking at because, again, Brady looks and respects him and Pete Carroll because those teams were so tough when he had to play him when he was a player. So there's that. So thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Oscar from Orange County. It's a quick one, calling to remind Raider Nation of a word that, well, many don't want to hear or exercise. That's patience. Here's Oscar from Orange County.
Hey, Q, I just want to say I love your show. I love listening to the podcast. And I just want to remind, hey, this is Oscar from Orange County. Anyways, just want to remind the Raider Nation that we need to be patient. I know we've had, 20-plus years going downwards, but I think with Tom Brady maybe calling some shots here, we're trending upwards, and we just got to give this thing some time. That's all I have to say, but Q, enjoying your show.
Oscar, thanks for the call. Appreciate you, and I agree. It's going to take patience, and I know nobody in Raider Nation wants to hear that. I get that, right? I've been around for the whole long ride. I know, right? I mean, but the problem is the reason why patience has got to be exercised is because every time there's a change, it's pressing reset. It's like back in the day when I was playing Super Mario Brothers, and I get to, I think it's Super Mario 2. Anyway, I get close to winning the whole game, and then all of a sudden, whoever I was playing with, whoever was, controller 2, would all of a sudden press reset because they had just lost their last life. Guess what? Got to start the whole game over, right? There was none of that save or pick up where you left off. No, it's none of that. It was you just lost, right? So whenever they have a coaching change, it's like pressing reset on Super Mario Brothers, right? It's like all of a sudden there's the reset. Even when they're playing well or they're looking better, there's always going to be a bunch of changes. Even and I've been guilty of saying, when Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels took over because they had just come off a playoff run, I was like, oh, it's not a rebuild. They're just going to continue. They're going to make what they had last year better. Nope, it was a rebuild, right? Every single time. That's what I've come to understand. Think about this: since the Raiders lost the Super Bowl with Bill Callahan, right? They've had Norv Turner, Art Shell, Lane Kiffin, Tom Cable, Hugh Jackson, Dennis Allen, Tony Sperano, rest in peace, Jack Del Rio, John Gruden 2.0, Rich Bisaccia as an interim, Josh McDaniels, Antonio Pierce as the interim, and then Antonio Pierce as a full-time head coach, and whoever's next. Since the Raiders lost the Super Bowl, and that was what, calendar year 2003? That's just way too many coaches. The Steelers haven't had that many coaches in the history of their team, let alone in a 15-year period. It's just, you just can't have that. So that's why patience is going to have to be expressed. And the good thing, and exercise, the good thing is John Spytek has a 5-year deal, 5 years to be the GM of the Silver and Black. That is a very big positive as far as I'm concerned. Thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Thanks for the kind words on the show as well. Up next, got a text from Southern Indiana Raider. Hey, Q, Southern Indiana Raider here, was listening to the podcast and talk about Rivera. I can't express enough how disappointed I'll be if that's who gets the job. He's probably a great guy, but he's proven himself to be a below-average coach. I don't want to retread. Pete Carroll would be acceptable, but I'd much rather go with a young coach and give him the opportunity and time to mold his team. Stung me pretty bad missing out on Johnson. That's Southern Indiana Raider. And, yeah, well, I understand that, and I'm not real high on Ron Rivera either, right? We did a deep dive on him because he has been interviewed by the Raiders. He's a guy that built a culture there in Carolina. He built a culture in Carolina that, was obviously really good, and once he left, it wasn't good. Right, and they still haven't really found out anything. And I know he went on to Washington, didn't have success there. But when you got Daniel Snyder as the guy that's hovering over you, I don't blame anyone for not having success. So I don't really put that on him. What happened in Washington? I know some people do. I know there was a lot of pushback from Thursday's show when we did a deep dive on Ron Rivera. That's okay. But again, you try to work for Daniel Snyder. I'll wait. It's not going to be easy. On top of that, who's the young hotshot that you're waiting for? Right? I mean, Liam Cohen is off to the Jags. Ben Johnson is in Chicago. I mean, there's not too many guys. Cliff Kingsbury, but he sounds like he's going to stay in D.C. with the Commanders. Nobody's talking about him. I don't know. I mean, maybe Joe Brady, but there's not been any conversation about Joe Brady, the OC of the Bills. I don't know if he's ready. I know he did some good things at LSU, but from the people that the Raiders have talked to, who's the hotshot young guy that you're looking at? I don't really see that guy. That's why the big questions still remain, and that's why I think Pete Carroll is going to end up getting the job now. But again, I understand how you feel about Ron Rivera, but thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. We'll close out with a call from Raider Eddie in Hollywood, Florida. He's calling to talk about GM John Spytek and where he was able to get some more information on him. Here he is, Raider Eddie in Hollywood, Florida.
Hey, Q, what's going on? This is Raider Eddie out of Hollywood, Florida. Listen to your show all the time. Want to say thank you for all that you do. Big fan. Listen to your podcast on my way to work every single morning. So I am one of the first listeners, if you will. I, like many of Raider Nation or some of Raider Nation, was a little uncertain and unsure about who John Spytek is, our new GM, right? So I listened to your podcast when you did a deep dive on John. And I went a little bit further, and I wanted to share this with Raider Nation in case they were interested in, getting a little bit more info on who John Spytek is. There is this podcast available on Apple and Spotify it's named The Play Callers, and there is an episode on there in October. They do one once a month. The October one is with John Spytek. And it's about an hour-long conversation with he and the host. There's a lot of great questions asked about him, his relationship with football, his philosophies on scouting and being a general manager, how he came to this position, and a lot of other personal stories about something he and his wife went through together. I thought it was great. It really gave me insight into the kind of person that is now joining Raider Nation, and by the end of that interview, I felt very, very differently than when I had first listened. Before I was concerned, unsure, wary. Now I feel confident. I feel really confident in not just his track record and what he's done in Tampa and before, but with the way he goes about his business. And I don't want to give too much away. I'd rather you guys go and give it a good listen. I appreciate it. I hope all of Raider Nation would appreciate it. And hopefully there's some good stuff there that you guys all fall in love with, as I did. Other than that, be good, guys. I love you, Raider Nation. One more time for everybody on 3. 1, 2, 3. Raiders! One love.
Thanks so much for the call, Raider Eddie. Man, we got a lot of Raider Eddies, right? Raider Eddie in Denver, Raider Eddie in Hollywood, Florida, Raider Eddie in L.A. Man, there's a lot of Raider Eddies that listen to the show. I appreciate that, though. That's awesome. We gotta do a show, a Raider Eddie show. We'll do a whole segment just Raider Eddie calls. That'd be fantastic. Anyway, getting back to the subject. Yeah, that podcast on John Spytek, the Play Callers podcast, Jordan Rodriguez does it. She hosts it from The Athletic. She does a great job. She is very well versed and does a really good job just covering the league. And yeah, that podcast, she actually tweeted a link of it out the minute that John Spytek was even announced by Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport is going to be the guy that gets the job. And I've had a lot of Raider Nation hit me up and say, hey, here you go, listen to this and put it on the podcast. But I don't want to take her podcast and put it on my podcast, right? Especially because it was a big body of work. It wasn't just a clip here or a clip there that I'd want to bring. It's a whole hour long, like you mentioned. So I encourage people to go listen to it. I think it's really good. I've been trying to bring little experts here and there from different people that I talk to on my radio show about Spytek. But if you want a deep dive, maybe over the weekend as well, I do encourage you to go check that out. The Play Callers podcast, The Athletic put it out. Jordan Rodriguez does a very good job. She's the host of it, and it's easy to find wherever you get your favorite podcast. So I'm not a hater. I definitely promote really good stuff and encourage people to go listen to really good stuff, and that is some really good stuff. So Raider Eddie in Hollywood, Florida, thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. And that's going to do it. Raider Nation, that's going to do it for this week. Who knows what's going to happen next, as I've finished every show all week long. Been saying keep your head on a swivel. The Raiders still need to hire their head coach now that their GM is signed, sealed, and delivered. 5-year deal for John Spytek. That's really good. Now when's the head coach going to come down the pipeline? Well, we'll find out sooner rather than later. We don't know as of yet. Matter of fact, as you're listening to this show, the announcement may already be made of who the next head coach is, but we don't know that. I do know that we've got a long weekend, got some good football action to watch this weekend. We'll know who's going to the Super Bowl by the end of Sunday, and maybe we'll know who the Raiders head coach will be by the end of Sunday as well. No matter what we do, we'll be back on Monday to talk about everything going on, all things silver and black. So Raider Nation, as I mentioned, keep your head on a swivel. Have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the NFL action. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.